Earlier this week, I pushed out a message to my YouTube channel community tab, to Twitter and to Facebook, inviting people to ask me almost anything. This is what happened. Hi folks, I'm Craig Taylor, and as always, a huge thanks for joining me here on my YouTube channel, The Bushcraft Padawan, and thank you for joining me in the first of what might be the last, or might be many, Ask Me Anything type videos. Just to recap, a few days ago I said to people, I'm planning to do something different on YouTube, fire a question at me, and if I think I can answer it, then I will put that into a video and respond. And here is that said video. I was quite surprised at how many people responded, and I was also quite surprised that some people posed 2 or more questions, let alone just the one that I'd invited them to do. So this video is not going to be a response to everybody and every question that they asked, because I actually think I could get a couple of videos out of it, milk it for all it's worth. So I'm only going to answer, I think, 4 questions in this particular video. So if your question isn't being answered, it's not because I don't think it's a good question, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's just because I'm going to put it into a follow-up video. Without further ado then, first 2 people that asked a question asked very, very similar questions, to be perfectly honest. Subtly different, but very, very similar. So I'm going to wrap them up in one response. Ralph from Rathvulven Bushcraft, you asked if I could elaborate on navigation techniques to be used in whiteout conditions. And Tactic Al, you said, how can you go about training for navigating in whiteout conditions without being in whiteout conditions? So very, very similar questions. So let me wrap up my response as a one here. Let's think about whiteout conditions. What do they do? What do they hinder from a navigational perspective? They make it hard to see things. They make it hard to judge distance. They make it hard to see any distance. They make it hard to see things that are close to you. They obscure linear details, streams and tracks. They can obscure, depending on the snowfall that there's been, they can also obscure terrain analysis and the ability to actually be able to see the shape of the land. They also obscure that. They can give you a sense of disorientation, and having been in a whiteout, they can certainly make you lose the disparity between ground and sky. There's literally no horizon, it just all becomes white. All of those things are stacked up against you from when it comes from a navigational perspective. I think you would be foolhardy, and I'm not saying that either of you are suggesting this, I think it would be foolhardy to learn how to navigate in a whiteout by putting yourself into a whiteout. They are conditions that most people do not actively seek out. They are conditions that when you are in them, you should rely on the training and experience that you've gained beforehand and call upon that experience to deal with what you're discovering in the whiteout. So let's look at some conditions then that can help you to emulate it. And the closest one, the most accessible one, I think, is night navigation. At night, detail can be hidden from you. You can't see things at distance. You sometimes can't see things that are close to you. You sometimes lose the disparity between ground and sky, depending on how dark it is. So there's a lot of similarities between navigating at night and navigating in whiteout conditions. So that would be my starting point, would be start navigating at night more. Pick a good night. Pick a night that is clear of clouds. Pick a night that has a full moon. So there's lots of starlight, there's lots of sunlight. Don't make life harder for yourself. Once you become familiar with navigating at night, then maybe pick a night where there is no moon. Maybe pick a night where there is a lot of cloud cover. Maybe pick a night where there is no moon, a lot of cloud cover, and maybe there's some rain, maybe there's some mist and some fog. You know, graduate what is accessible to you from a weather condition perspective, which is rarely whiteouts. Graduate them to help you become more familiar in navigating with the challenges that whiteout conditions bring. So that would be my first point. The second point would be, and you can do this at night or during the day, but focus more on what I would call micro navigation. What I mean by that is instead of navigating the way that I guess lots of people do, I am at this church, I'm going to navigate to that crossroads. I'm at the crossroads, I'm going to navigate to that trig point. I'm at the trig point, I'm going to navigate to that telephone box. Rather than doing your big scale sort of navigation, scale things down. make things more difficult, make things more micro. Instead of starting at the church, you know, start at a spot height, and so from this spot height I'm going to go to that kink in the 50-meter contour line. From there I'm going to go to that index contour line over there. From there I'm going to go to this particular part of the wood line where the 150-meter contour line intersects with the wood line. You can actually find that you don't have to go very far. You don't have to have your map unfolded this big. You don't have to travel a great deal of distance sometimes if you're micro navigating to really, really hone and push your navigation skills on a micro level. And I would suggest that, having been in a whiteout, when you are in a whiteout, you are not looking for your big navigation features. You really are focusing almost what's under your feet or what's a few feet ahead, and being able to gauge things that way. So from my experience as a decent navigator, from someone that's been in a whiteout, my advice would be to both Ralph and also to Tactical: don't seek out whiteout conditions. Chances are you're not going to find them because they're a rare occurrence in comparison to nighttime. And most parts of the world, you are guaranteed to get a nighttime once every 24 hours. Let's be really honest. So there's loads of opportunities for you to get out and to emulate similar conditions to a whiteout by navigating in limited visibility. Couple that with micro navigation technique and really slowing down, focusing in on the micro nature of navigation. Put those two together. Should you ever find yourself in a whiteout, those experiences and confidence that you've gained from limited visibility and micro nav will stand you in incredibly good stead should you ever find yourself in a whiteout. So hopefully, Ralph and Tactical, that's answered your question around navigation and whiteout conditions. Let's turn my attention to somebody else that posed a question in my AMA post, which was Anthony Altieri. Anthony, you said, what one tool do I think you must have in a bushcraft situation? Now, I'm discounting a survival situation here. You've said bushcraft, and that's what I'm going to focus on. In a bushcraft situation, what's the one tool that I think you must have? And you emphasise the word must. The obvious train of thought is to see tool and think knife, axe, saw, cutting tools. I think that's the obvious train of thoughts, and you did say tool. So if I had to choose one of those three, I would go for an axe, because I think I can do everything with an axe that I can do almost everything I can do with an axe that I can do with a knife, although perhaps not the daintier, more fine things. But it's very difficult for a knife to scale up to what an axe can do. So I'd probably go for an axe. But I'm wondering, did you mean tool? Or did you mean piece of kit? Because actually, if you meant piece of kit, what one piece of kit do I think people must have in a bushcraft situation? I'm changing your question for you, hope you don't mind. I would say it'd be a first aid kit, or an individual first aid kit, or some means of being able to treat and look after somebody or yourself if you have sustained an injury. All of the other tools, all of the other fancy gadgets and tools and expensive things that we sometimes take out into the woods with us pale into insignificance if you have injured yourself and can't use them. If you are injured yourself and are hemorrhaging, if you or somebody that you are with is injured or ill in such a way that that really your fancy knives and your axes and your fancy firelighting techniques and your tap and all of that, they're pointless if you've sustained a sufficient injury to stop you being able to benefit from them and use them. So that would be the piece of kit that I would suggest I think everybody must have in a bushcraft situation. I know that wasn't the question you asked. I've adapted it as to what I thought you might have meant. But if you did mean tool, I would say it was an axe. Your second question, Anthony, you asked quite a few questions, and I will get to the others, I promise. Just I'll do it in another video. What do I think is the most important skill to learn when bushcrafting, and what's the best way to learn it? You might be unsurprised to hear, given the answer I've just given a minute or two ago, I think the most important skill is some first aid training. Again, all of the other skill sets that you relate to bushcraft, in my opinion, pale into insignificance if you become injured and can't do something about it. If the person you are with becomes injured and you can't help them, everything else it goes out of the window, in my opinion. Also, let's not forget, it's not the only bushcraft skill that's transferable, but let's be realistic with ourselves. It's the most important bushcraft skill, in my opinion, that's transferable at home, at work, at your kids' school, in the playground, in the shops, at the sports stadium, wherever. Those skills that you've learned to help you when bushcrafting, massively and importantly transferable to every other walk of life. Let's be really clear about this. You potentially have a skill set to save your own life, a loved one's life, or a stranger's life. If we boil it down to that, I can't think of a skill to have more important than that. You also ask, what's the best way to learn it? I think the best way to learn it is through a reputable, accredited, up-to-date, certified, validated, whatever word you want to use, first aid type of trainer. The reason I've stressed all of those validated and certified and qualified is first aid protocols in most parts of the world, certainly here in the UK, they change fairly regularly. Every couple of years or thereabouts, they will change. They will change based upon clinical practice. If something isn't working and the evidence stacks against it, then there's a good chance the first aid protocols will change. If new techniques have been tested and introduced and they are proven to be working with an impact, the first aid protocols might change. That's why I'm suggesting you need to go to someone that knows this and keep themselves up to date. They keep themselves at least one step ahead of you, hopefully more, in terms of first aid protocols. You don't want to be going to old Jack, who learnt it in the army 45 years ago, because, yeah, things will have changed since old Jack was in the army 45 years ago. You want to be going to someone that keeps themselves up to date. You do not want to be going to, in my opinion, Facebook or YouTube to receive medical training. Now, some of those accredited providers that you might seek out, that you do end up trusting and going to, they might have their own social media channels. They might be very good sources for you to continue learning from. But I would not go to YouTube or Facebook and just randomly search for something and assume that just because it's on Facebook or YouTube, I'm teaching you to suck eggs here, it's of any quality whatsoever. Very recently, Anthony, I think it was last night or the night before, I was looking at some tourniquet application techniques, and what I saw was, I reported it to YouTube through the reporting channel. I couldn't quite report it for the right reasons because it didn't really match any of their reasons, but if whoever that person was treating hadn't died of their injuries or lost a limb as a result of their injuries, they were going to die or lose a limb because of the treatment that they were suggesting should be applied to somebody with a gross bleed or a traumatic amputation. So, yeah, I have no problems with Facebook and YouTube if I trust the source of the content, not just randomly searching for stuff. So, yeah, accredited providers for first aid training, which I believe is the most important skill that you can acquire when bushcrafting, and coupled with that, therefore a first aid kit is the most important piece of kit that you can take out with you when bushcrafting. So 3 people posing questions, 4 questions answered there. If you didn't get your question answered, it's not because I thought it was a rubbish question by any stretch, it's just because I want to milk this, gain maximum value from this opportunity for as long as possible. So Ralph, Anthony, Tactical, if you agree or disagree with what I've said, then let me know below. If you think that there is a better way to be training for and getting experience with navigating in a whiteout other than being in a whiteout, if you've got other ideas, say so in the comments below, please do. Anthony, if you think that there is a better piece of kit or a more critical piece of kit or skill to be learning, let me know what that is in the comments below. This is not Dictator Craig sat on his throne saying these are the answers. These are people asking for my opinion on something. They're getting it. It's an exchange of ideas and thoughts. happens, isn't it? So hopefully you three guys, you've got some value from that, and it's given you something to look at or look into. If you're watching this and you're not yet a subscriber, hit that subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. If you are a subscriber, a huge thank you. Fast approaching 4,000 subscribers, and we know what happens when that happens, don't we? See you in the next video very shortly. Cheers.